In every missing person case, time is everything. Minutes matter. Hours can mean the difference between rescue and recovery, between hope and heartbreak. In the disappearance of Jay Slater, it's not just the passage of time that matters, it's what's missing from it. Because when you examine the timeline of Jay's final known hours, you find more than just gaps. You find silence, you find contradiction, you find pieces that don't quite fit. Jay disappeared on the morning of June the 17th. We're told he left the airB&B in the remote village of Masca after going there with two men he had met just the day before. We're told he called his friend Lucy at around 8:30 a.m, panicked and dehydrated, saying he was lost in the mountains with just 1% battery left. And yet, his phone didn't die at 8:30 a.m. The official inquest confirms it remained active until at least 8:51 a.m, and in that time, it was recording motion, elevation changes, and digital activity. So what really happened between 8:30 and 8:51 a.m? And what happened after? More importantly, why are so many parts of the timeline based on recollections that don't quite align? Why did the people closest to Jay, those who last heard from him, go strangely quiet in the hours and days that followed? This theory exists because time doesn't lie, but people can. And when key parts of a timeline are missing, delayed, or conflicting, it forces us to ask the hardest questions. Were we told the full truth about that final morning? Who spoke to Jay, and when? And is it possible that some parts of the timeline were manipulated to obscure something far more sinister? At the heart of Jay Slater's disappearance lies a single, unchangeable fact. He was moving. Not just metaphorically, not hypothetically, but physically. Thanks to forensic data extracted from his iPhone, including Apple's Health app, police were able to reconstruct Jay's final recorded steps. From 7:59 a.m. to 8:49 a.m, his phone logged significant activity. Movement across rough, steep terrain consistent with the area around the Park Rural d'Eterno. It wasn't idle motion. It wasn't someone pacing or standing still. It showed elevation gain, rapid changes in direction, and a sustained burst of exertion, likely uphill, in some of the most rugged terrain on the island. The data reveals that Jay was actively trying to get somewhere, possibly to safety. But what happened just before this movement began? According to the narrative, Jay left the airB&B at around 8 a.m, shortly before calling Lucy Law. In her original GoFundMe post, Lucy claimed that the call came in at 8:30 a.m. She described him as panicked, dehydrated, lost, and down to 1% battery. But here's where it gets difficult. That phone did not die at 8:30 a.m. Data confirms it was still active at 8:49 a.m, with one final sign of life, a digital heartbeat, coming at 8:51 a.m. After that, complete silence. So either Lucy got the time wrong, or something else was happening in those crucial 21 minutes between the supposed phone call and the final digital ping. And the phone's movements before and after the call raise even more questions. If Jay was moving before he called Lucy, how far had he already gone? Was he really lost, or running from something? And how coherent was he when he made that final call? This chapter matters because it draws the line between fact and assumption. We know Jay was moving. We know the terrain was brutal. We know he was still alive, or at least his phone was active, until 8:51 a.m. But we don't know who else he might have spoken to. We don't know if the call to Lucy was really his last. And we certainly don't know what he may have seen or realized in those last 50 minutes of data-driven movement. Whatever happened in that window is the key to this entire mystery. In any missing person case, a timeline is everything. It helps us piece together the final known movements, who spoke to the missing individual, when, where they were seen, and what condition they were in. But in the case of Jay Slater, one of the most crucial windows of time, between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. on Monday, June the 17th, is filled with contradictions. The further we investigate this hour, the more the story starts to unravel. Let's begin with what we know from the inquest and witness accounts. At 7:30 a.m., Jay Slater video called his friend Brad Hargreaves. During that call, Jay reportedly said he didn't have enough money for a taxi. Brad told him to just get in a taxi and jump out. According to Brad, Jay appeared to be walking during this call and was not inside the airB&B. This is critical because it contradicts later claims that Jay was still at the property at that time. Brad also stated that Jay ended the call abruptly, claiming he was receiving another phone call. But here's the problem. The only publicly confirmed call after this was the one to Lucy Law, and that happened at 8:30 a.m., a full hour later. So the obvious question is, who was Jay speaking to at 7:30 a.m. if it wasn't Lucy? Could it have been Brandon Hodgson? We do know that Jay spoke to Brandon at some point, but the exact time of that conversation has not been made public yet. During this call, it is reported that Brandon had received a text message from Jay saying, "I've started walking." Brandon added, he was laughing at first, then he sent me his location. On the phone he said to me, "I've been walking for half an hour." I told him to go back and he said, "I've already been walking for half an hour. I'm not going back. I don't want to go back. I just want to go home." Adding more complexity, a short video showing mountain terrain, reportedly taken between 5:50 a.m. and 7:20 a.m., was sent to Jay's friend Joshua Forshaw around that same morning. This suggests Jay had already left the airB&B by sunrise, which again doesn't align with other claims. Now enter the statement from Ayub Qassim, one of the men Jay was with at the airB&B. He told police Jay left the property at around 7:30 a.m. and was last seen near the airB&B at 8 a.m., confirmed by two construction workers who say they saw Jay asking for bus times. But Qassim also says that the buzzer rang at 8 a.m, and when he answered it, Jay was downstairs and refused to open the door. If true, this would place Jay at the airB&B at 8 a.m, directly contradicting the construction workers' sighting. Meanwhile, Lucy Law's call with Jay is widely reported to have taken place at 8:30 a.m. She stated that Jay was lost in the mountains, needed a drink, and had 1% battery. She says the call cut out, but we know from the Apple Health data that Jay's phone recorded physical activity up until 8:49 a.m. That means the phone didn't die at 8:30 a.m. as claimed, and Jay was still moving after that point. That brings us back to the critical inconsistencies. First is Brad's video call at 7:30 a.m, in which Brad suggested it showed Jay walking, but Ayub says he was at the airB&B at that time. Next is the construction workers claim they saw Jay near the road at 7:50 a.m, but Qassim says Jay was at the airB&B when the buzzer went at 8 a.m. Then there's Lucy's 8:30 a.m. call that supposedly came just before the phone died, but Apple Health shows activity for another 19 minutes. Along with this, Brad claims Jay ended their call because another call was coming in, but Lucy's call was later, not concurrent. So who did Jay speak to in between, and was there another call that we haven't been told about? Or is someone in this story not being fully truthful? This is no small discrepancy. In missing persons investigations, even 5 minutes can be the difference between a lead and a dead end. Here, we're dealing with over an hour of contradictions across multiple witnesses. Every version can't be true, and when every key witness offers a different sequence of events with no consistency, the only logical conclusion is this: someone is lying, or a crucial piece of the puzzle is still missing. The confusion around these calls may not just be a coincidence. It could be the result of a cover-up, or at very least, a deliberate withholding of the truth. And as the timeline fractures, the mystery deepens. When Jay Slater vanished, investigators were left with no witnesses, no CCTV, and no solid leads. But they had one thing: a phone signal. It was the last known trace of Jay's location, a digital breadcrumb that became central to the search. That final ping came from a location deep within the Parque Rural de Teno, a mountainous nature reserve in northwestern Tenerife. The exact coordinates have not been made public, but we know they placed Jay in a rugged, steep ravine area. But this final location raises serious questions, and not just about where Jay ended up, but how he got there. We know that Jay was supposedly at the airB&B in Masca. Ayub Qassim, one of the two men Jay was with, claimed Jay left the airB&B on foot at around 8 a.m, saying he wanted to catch a bus. But here's where the details become crucial. The location where Jay's phone last pinged, and where his body was later found, is roughly 3.5 to 4 kilometers away from the airB&B. That's a 45 to 60 minute walk, minimum, and in the opposite direction of the bus stop, or any reasonable route back towards his accommodation. Even more importantly, the terrain between the airB&B and the final ping point isn't flat or urban. It's steep, rocky, wild. No paths, no signage. It's the kind of place you only end up in if you're hiking or lost. So why would Jay go uphill and away from civilization if he thought he was heading back to his hotel? We also know from Jay's Apple Health data that his phone recorded intense movement and elevation gain between 7:59 a.m. and 8:49 a.m. That aligns with someone climbing or trekking through mountainous terrain. And then, silence. This suggests Jay walked for nearly an hour, covering a considerable distance and altitude change before something happened. But again, if he left the airB&B at 8 a.m. as claimed, he would have needed at least 45 minutes to reach the ping location. That means his final phone activity and health data coincide precisely with that estimated walking time. In other words, his phone made it to that ravine by foot. Here lies the central mystery. Why was Jay heading uphill into isolation? Was he lost, confused, running from something? Or did someone lead him that way? Qassim claimed he offered to drive Jay, but Jay declined. That makes no sense if Jay truly didn't know the area and had no water, no money, no map, and just 1% phone battery. And if Jay had been with Qassim and Rokas since the night before, why would he be so desperate and disoriented the next morning? Why didn't they help him? The uphill route, and the fact that Jay ended up in a place further from safety, isn't just a tragic detail. It may be the single most important clue. It tells us that Jay was either misled deliberately in the wrong direction, panicking, running from danger, or following a false path, either by mistake or manipulation. And it raises one chilling possibility. Was Jay being chased? At 8:51 a.m. on the morning of June the 17th, 2024, Jay Slater's iPhone stopped recording movement. His final burst of physical activity had lasted nearly an hour, reflecting thousands of steps over rugged terrain. The data paints a clear picture. Jay was moving consistently, possibly climbing, navigating, or even scrambling his way through the steep inclines. And then there was silence. No more steps, no outgoing or incoming messages, no further location data. Just one final ping, his phone's last known signal in a near inaccessible part of the ravine. So what happened after 8:51 a.m? It's during this window that everything changes. This is the gap between movement and stillness, between activity and total silence. Jay's phone, according to the data presented at the inquest, doesn't record any further health metrics, calls, or messages after 8:51 a.m. If something did happen, whether it was an accidental fall, a medical emergency, or something more sinister, how likely is it that this occurred within this critical 30-minute window? But we don't know exactly what, and that lack of certainty has led to widespread speculation. By mid-morning, friends back at the hotel began to express concern. Lucy Law, who reportedly spoke to Jay at 8:30 a.m, described him as disoriented and lost, with only 1% battery. That single detail sets off alarm bells. Again, this is where things get even more murky. According to media accounts, Lucy went straight to the police to report Jay missing, even though she's not long spoken to him. She reportedly attempted to figure out where he might be, and somehow managed to locate the Airbnb from a vague image that did not show sufficient detail to locate somewhere as rural as that particular Airbnb. This delay, while understandable in the chaos of panic of the moment, created a critical gap. By the time authorities were alerted and an official search began, Jay had already been uncontactable for hours. It wasn't until late morning or early afternoon that the police began the initial stages of their search. By this point, Jay had likely already been missing for over 4 hours, without water, proper clothing, or supplies. The weather conditions in this area can be brutal in the summer sun, with temperatures rising sharply by midday, and terrain that offers no shelter. If Jay had fallen or was incapacitated, the clock was ticking on survivability. Search teams began to arrive in Masca, but with only a vague phone ping and conflicting accounts of Jay's last known position, they were effectively starting blind. By early afternoon, the buzz on social media had begun. Missing posters circulated, friends, family, and volunteers began searching. But all of it was reactive, not proactive. No one knew for certain where Jay had gone. No one could verify the phone's last exact coordinates. And crucially, no one, apart from the 2 men he was last with, could confirm the condition he was in when he left the Airbnb that morning. There's also no indication that either of those men, Ayub Qassim or Stephen Rokas, actively participated in the search. It wasn't until much later that local authorities escalated the search effort. By then, Jay had been missing for nearly an entire day. His phone had been silent for hours, and the trail, whatever existed, had gone cold. The ruggedness of the terrain meant that dogs, drones, and helicopters had to be deployed. Even then, the area was so difficult to navigate that teams only made slow progress. What happened between 8:51 a.m. and the early evening hours of June the 17th remains one of the most frustrating black holes in this case. No witnesses, no digital footprints, no phone calls, no final messages, no confirmed sightings. Just a boy in the mountains, and then nothing. In any investigation, timelines are only as strong as the people who fill them. And in Jay Slater's case, some of the most crucial hours remain clouded in silence. Not just because of the terrain or lack of surveillance, but because of the people involved. People who could have spoken up more. People who were there, but have not accounted for their time in full. Jay Slater apparently left Papagayo nightclub in the early hours of June the 17th and supposedly got into a car with 2 men he barely knew, Ayub Qassim and Stephen Rokas. They drove him roughly 22 miles away to a remote Airbnb in the mountain village of Masca. Qassim later admitted that he had known Jay only briefly. Beyond the initial interaction, Qassim's timeline is full of contradictions and omissions. He claimed Jay left the Airbnb at around 7:30 a.m. to catch a bus. He also said that the buzzer went off at 8 a.m. when the owners of the property asked him to move his car, and that Jay didn't answer the door. So which was it? But here's where silence begins to scream. Why was Jay afraid to answer the door? Why did Qassim not join the search later? Why has Rokas never spoken publicly? For 2 people who may have been the last to see Jay alive, their detachment from the search and near total disappearance from the media narrative is striking. Lucy Law told multiple outlets she was the last person to speak to Jay at around 8:30 a.m. But Jay's digital footprint raises questions. So who was the other caller, if there was one? And why does it appear that Lucy was unaware of the Brad call, or that Brad was unaware of hers? And while Lucy was instrumental in raising awareness, and even setting up the GoFundMe, Her movements during the 12 hours after Jay's disappearance have never been fully detailed in any official account. Then there's the case of Brandon Hodgson, a name only mentioned once in court, linked to a GPS message Jay sent via WhatsApp. Jay's final hours included a flurry of calls and messages to various friends, but only Lucy, Brad, and a few others have spoken, and even then, their accounts don't align. Perhaps the most frustrating silence comes from the authorities. Despite multiple inquiries and international interest, Spanish police have remained tight-lipped about many aspects of the case. There has been no formal release of CCTV footage, no detailed press conference outlining the timeline, and very little clarification of known inconsistencies. And when silence falls over a case, especially one that spans nations and languages, rumours begin to fill the vacuum. There are gaps in testimony, and until they're filled with the truth, whatever it may be, remains just out of reach. In cases where human memory fails or testimony is unclear, technology can sometimes tell the story. For Jay Slater, one of the most revealing witnesses wasn't a person at all. It was his iPhone. What that device recorded in its final hours may be the clearest glimpse into Jay's movements, his condition, and his likely time of death. But even the iPhone data, cold, clinical, and time-stamped, raises more questions than it answers. Let's unpack what the digital evidence reveals. According to testimony, Jay's phone showed a burst of physical movement from 7:59 a.m. to 8:49 a.m. That aligns with reports that he was attempting to walk back to his hotel from Masca, an 11-hour journey by foot. But at exactly 8:49 a.m., everything stopped. That moment may mark the instant Jay collapsed, fell, or was incapacitated. The phone still had battery at 8:49 a.m., approximately 1%, but it never transmitted again after that. One of the key digital clues was a location ping Jay sent via WhatsApp to a friend named Brandon Hodgson. This placed him in a steep, cactus-covered ravine, close to where his remains were eventually discovered weeks later. But here's the catch. Brandon Hodgson has never been located or brought forward to explain the context of that message. Why did Jay choose to send his location to Brandon, and not to Lucy Law or Brad Hargreaves, who had been in direct contact earlier? Did Brandon ask for the location? Did he attempt to help? Why hasn't he spoken out? The silent witness, Brandon, becomes as important as the data itself. Another digital breadcrumb was the infamous photo of Jay hiding knives in his shorts. According to court testimony, this photo was sent to a friend, believed to be Josh, around 90 minutes before Jay's final call to Brad. Jay reportedly captioned the image as a joke, in case it kicks off. So was he scared? Or was he preparing for something? Or was it simply a misguided attempt at humour in a tense situation? What the phone data shows is that Jay was not relaxed. His behaviour, his messages, and his escalating attempts to reach friends, all while moving through hostile terrain, suggest panic, exhaustion, or fear. Critically, forensic examination of the iPhone movement data supports the theory that Jay's phone did not continue moving after 8:49 a.m. It didn't slide, tumble, or fall long distances. Its journey, as recorded by Apple's internal sensors, ended abruptly. But even the most precise data has limits. The iPhone showed how Jay moved, but not why. It showed when the phone stopped moving, but not who might have been nearby or who was handling it. It revealed where the device was. Even with data from Jay Slater's iPhone, a detailed step count, and precise GPS coordinates, there remains a 50-minute window filled with silence, fear, and uncertainty. And where hard facts end, theories begin. A darker theory proposes that Jay was already dead by 8:30 a.m, and that someone else moved the phone to where it later pinged. either to delay the search or to distance themselves from the scene. Still, technology isn't infallible. Could a phone be manipulated to simulate movement? Possibly. In every investigation, there's evidence, and then there's silence. And in the case of Jay Slater, it's that silence between 8:51 a.m. and the moment his body was discovered that may hold the most devastating answers. Because the silence isn't just the absence of the phone's signals or text messages, it's the absence of truth, of closure, of certainty. Jay Slater was a young man on his first trip abroad. He went to Tenerife with friends for music and memories. Instead, his final hours played out in a terrifying blur, one that ended in the jagged ravines of a national park known for its unforgiving terrain and dangerous isolation. We know that Jay's device was active from just before 8 a.m. until 8:49 a.m. We know his phone pinged from a remote hillside, a place nearly no one would go unless deliberately trying to disappear. We know that at 8:51 a.m., his phone died, and after that, there was nothing. What happened after that moment is a void filled with possibility and pain. Did Jay fall? Was he pushed? Was he alone? Was he even there at all? Did he know he was in danger? Was he being hunted? Or simply lost and dehydrated? The silence doesn't just affect the investigation, it haunts the people left behind. A grieving mother, a nation of strangers who watched the story unfold in real time. And in a world where conspiracy, rumor, and speculation now threaten to drown out the facts, in this case, the silence is deafening. But silence doesn't mean we stop asking questions. It means we ask better ones. It means we examine what was said, what was unsaid, and what was never explained. It means we hold those involved accountable, not with blame, but with truth. Jay Slater deserved better. His family deserves answers. And the public deserves clarity in a world where mystery too often becomes entertainment. The minutes between 7:30 and 8:51 a.m. and the moment Jay was found are still missing. But they are not forgotten. We will continue searching in those gaps, because the truth doesn't hide forever, and neither should justice. In the end, it's not just about when Jay Slater died. It's about when he was truly lost. Lost in a timeline of contradictions. Lost in the silence of vanished calls and vanished friends. Lost somewhere between an airB&B and a hillside no one expected him to be on. The inconsistencies in the final hours between sunrise and silence demand scrutiny. If those closest to Jay hold pieces of this puzzle, they owe it to his memory and to the truth to come forward. And if no official accounts contain gaps, then we must be brave enough to fill them in. Because justice doesn't only come from convictions, it comes from clarity. And in this case, that clarity still feels far away. But we are not done, not by a long shot. If you found this episode compelling or thought-provoking, make sure to subscribe to the Silent Casebook. Leave a like if you believe Jay's story still deserves answers. Share your thoughts in the comments, but keep it respectful. This case involves real people, real grief, and real consequences. And if you know something, speak up. Silence protects no one. We'll see you in the next episode.